Hello, I'm Daniel Shields of CultivateAbundance.com, and today I'm sowing cover crop seeds. Now, in the kitchen garden project, I'm going to be using mulch methods. The problem with using mulch to eliminate grass and weeds to implement a new garden is that it requires a lot of organic matter, and you have to have a source for that organic matter. So the hay I have available is going into that project. But here, on a much larger area bordering the property, I'm going to be experimenting with what I hope will be a far more efficient method of implementing gardens in overgrown land. And that method is going to be cover cropping. Now, the first rule of permaculture is always plant a polyculture. It's never okay to plant just one species. So here I have two different seed mixes. The seed mix in the orange bucket contains nitrogen-fixing plants. Now, these plants have a symbiosis with bacteria that take atmospheric nitrogen that plants can't use and turn it into a form of nitrogen that the plants can absorb through their root system. So they're in a separate bucket because they've been inoculated with these bacterial cultures that they need to produce the nitrogen. If you just plant the seeds without inoculating first, you run the risk of the plants never encountering the right organisms in the natural ecosystem and thus never adding any more nitrogen to your soil, largely defeating the purpose of growing them. So I have two different legumes. I have Crotalaria and cowpea. Crotalaria is a broadleaf plant, growing relatively tall, produces a lot of biomass, has very deep roots, so puts a lot of nitrogen in the soil and a long way down into the soil. Of course, like any deep-rooted plant, it's going to dramatically improve the water retention of the soil, the penetration of water into the soil, start loosening the soil. As it decays, organisms will eat the roots and start producing water-stable aggregates. If you're not familiar with that, I'll be doing a video about water-stable aggregates, which are vitally important to every ecosystem. Most ecosystems, but more on that. And cowpeas are a vining legume. Again, produce a lot of biomass, deep roots, fixed nitrogen, but these will grow up the taller plants in the seed mixture. Now in this bucket, I have buckwheat. Buckwheat is a wonderful plant. It's heat tolerant and it's edible. You can eat the leaves in your salad, you can cook it like spinach, and it produces a seed that can be used as a pseudo grain. So pretty much any way you can use grain, you can use buckwheat. The Japanese make the soba noodle out of them. It's very delicious, highly nutrient dense, and doesn't have gluten because it's not technically a grain, so it's a much healthier option, particularly for those with celiac disease. Also in here is a daikon radish. Now a daikon radish is not heat loving, so I'm not sure how well it's going to grow here in the Georgia summer, but I think it's worth trying because daikon radishes, the name itself means large root, are wonderful for dealing with compacted clay soil like a lot of this is. And they have a very deep, large root that will break through that hard pan and allow water to drain in. So it increases the penetration of water into the soil and the retention of water afterwards. And of course it's an edible crop as well. Also in here is a smaller amount of chicory and clover, which are both perennial edible plants. The clover is also nitrogen fixing, has already comes coated in the bacteria from the groworganic.com is where I got these. And the chicory is a dynamic accumulator. So its deep root system will pull minerals out of deep in the soil, and then when the leaves decay, it'll add it to the top of the soil where shallow rooted plants can get to it. And of course, chicory greens are one of the most nutritious vegetables you can eat. Quite delicious, and the root can be roasted and brewed in a tea that's often used as a coffee substitute or added to coffee as a flavoring. So a wonderful mix of plants, going to produce a lot of biomass, and if I'm correct, I think with this ratio of seeding to square footage, I'll be able to outcompete most of this grass and weeds. And if not, I'll be producing a huge amount of mulch to use for composting and kill mulch techniques that I know work because I've done them. But if this works, it's going to take time, but in the fall, all of this will be garden space. So if this project succeeds, exciting things are coming in fall. So until next time, peace and permaculture.